Simpson. Who the hell are you?
There used to be this show called The Simpsons on TV. Now, while a lot of ink has been spilled about the show, in some cases by Dan Olsen using it as a lens to examine masculinity, by Hari Kondabolu to celebrate the diversity and complexity of his culture, by Super Eyepatch Wolf to examine the impact of a creative complex on the creative continuity, the institution, the brand of The Simpsons is basically cultural superstructure. You can't really go wrong writing about The Simpsons. You just need to make sure you both point out the recent series sucks, what would I know, and glorify in its history. We talk a lot about what The Simpsons is doing based on its creators, a sort of top-down perspective on the work from the narrowest point, which coincidentally is a position shared by people who, make films and run YouTube channels. But you know a thing we don't talk about as much? The Simpsons video games. Or, specifically, we don't talk much about this The Simpsons video game. Bart vs. the Space Mutants is a pretty dodgy little piece of tie-in garbage. It's sort of a side-scrolling adventure puzzler, with platform elements and a maze. A maze of all things, because mazes are fun, aren't they, 1991 acclaimed developers? It came out on kind of everything, and it showed in its control system on the PC. You moved left and right with O and P, and you moved up and down with Q and A, a type of control system that haunted me as a child, unable to work out just what exactly was wrong with using the arrow keys. Still, the port at least was very faithful. All the versions of the game I've been able to find seem pretty much identical. What you do in this game is move left to right, usually just going to the right, controlling Bart Simpson as he does stuff, to oppose the interests of a group of aliens that have really particular ideas about how to conquer Earth. And only Bart can tell because of his X-ray glasses. You know, those X-ray glasses Bart is shown having all the time in the TV show. And then you go and, you do Bart Simpson-y things. You set off bottle rockets, you throw cherry bombs, you spray paint things, you harass adults and you skateboard, you prank call people, you mess with people's laundry, knock off people's hats, and even, let's generously call it do battle with Sideshow Bob. It's a game that definitely knows what The Simpsons is, but doesn't at all seem to have a grasp on what The Simpsons is about. Instead, it imagines a Bart-centric view of the world, shown in the advertising media, where he's a cool boy who saves the day by being witty and clever despite being a mere child in a world full of adults, as opposed to the endlessly useless dullard who the show normally depicts as wasting time rather than doing things. And that's your lot. The gameplay is varied, but also somehow very dull, where mostly the game is just about finding the particular way it wants you to interfere with a thing the game's going to throw at you, which start with somewhat elaborate item puzzles and ends up with you just popping balloons and navigating a maze full of tiny, squinty objects. A maze! I have opinions on mazes. The game does demonstrate a lot of where it came from. It was a tie-in for a popular piece of media, and you got an almost Sonic the Hedgehog style, goodness, I was always going to bring it back to Sonic, antagonistic coolness to the cover art. The visuals of the game are by our modern standards pretty squinty, even if they are pretty indulgently large on screen, depending upon what platform you play it with. The game can't load vertically, so you just have this horizontal tube of a level where you can only really move back and forth until the final level, which is, again, a maze. Here's the thing about Bart vs. the Space Mutants, though. This game doesn't involve The Simpsons as the story presents them, which is mostly a story which dips into the fantastic only in Halloween specials. Broadly speaking, the problems Bart dealt with in the series were bullies and schoolwork and his abusive father, and the stories tended to orient around much more real-world sitcom problems, rather than Bart going on something you'd call an adventure. Instead, the story here, in this game, presents The Simpsons as the advertising looked to kids. There was a way of advertising and promoting The Simpsons merchandise, specifically to children, that this game uses as its haunted funhouse mirror. You could get Simpsons backpacks and notebooks and school supplies, and they carried with them an irreverence and an oddness and an invocation of something that The Simpsons definitely was not. This game made total sense to me as a kid. Bart was doing Bart-ish things. Bart was solving a problem in a Bart-ish way. And I never questioned the aliens. There were aliens in The Simpsons after all. You'd see stickers of them all the time. Those aliens, by the way, have plots that require purple items, hats, balloons, and some radioactive stuff. What I find so fascinating about this game in overview is the levels are almost perfectly tuned to what a kid would come up with when approaching the idea of The Simpsons based entirely on the advertising and iconography, rather than its actual story. It carries through. The mall is a big sequence of boring places because Bart doesn't care about stores that sell shoes or hats. His family are things to pick up, his mischief solutions to world-ending problems, and when the aliens are thwarted 4 or 5 times, their solution is to abandon Earth and honor Bart because he's just so cool. Bart vs. the Space Mutants is kind of an amazing little game that perfectly encapsulates The Simpsons as perceived by the children that watched it who didn't really get what they were watching. And, you know, some of those kids, because The Simpsons was something strangely of a family sitcom, its animation and periodic focus on the kids and butt humor meant that the audience was at times wider than the show ever meant it to be. And when the time came to create a game based off that, there was enough rich fodder in the negative space of the show, in the things the show definitely did not ever do, to create a nasty, gnarled, cladistic bush of so many different games put out on so many different platforms, of which just this one is, in my mind, a representative. And I do think of this game as representative. The Simpsons arcade game was similarly unhinged, with characters behaving in wildly unrealistic ways, and properties of Matt Groening's other work showing up in them, and just like the athleticism of the characters being wildly at odds with what you see in The Simpsons. But they're all based around that same idea of, this is not what The Simpsons is. This is how The Simpsons feels. So why bring it up when I talk about this game? Why not talk about The Simpsons arcade game, which is well beloved and has an entirely interesting licensing history around it? Well, it's because this game sucks. Bart vs. the Space Mutants is a shockingly mediocre game. It was put on so many platforms. You could buy this on the Spectrum, and at no point in that did you wind up with a game that was really worth the few hours you'd take to overcome its levels of fake difficulty. But I bet this one sold pretty well because the cover looked pretty cool. They've never really stopped selling stickers to kids.